The morning I finished folding my son's last box of laundry, his closest friend called and said, "Mr. Mercer, I found something Leo hid in the shop. You need to see it. And don't tell Dana. I think she's looking for it." I stood there with one of Leo's running shirts still in my hands. It had been washed already, but it still carried that faint clean soap smell he used to like. I remember smoothing the sleeve with my thumb and saying nothing for a second too long. For days earlier, we had scattered his ashes. For days earlier, I was still answering casseroles at the door and thanking people for flowers I could barely see through the blur in my eyes. Now a young man I trusted was telling me my dead son had hidden something from his own wife. I asked him where he was. He said Edmonton. I looked out through the kitchen window at the wet cedar fence behind my house in Nanaimo, the sky low and gray, the kind of quiet coastal morning my wife used to call soft weather. Then I told him I'd drive over on the first ferry. There was one other thing he said before we hung up. He knew something was wrong, he told me. I think he left a trail. I put the phone face down. Then I waited. My name is Thomas Mercer. I was 68 that winter, retired after most of my adult life in provincial investigations, and by then I had already buried my wife. Claire died 3 years earlier. Lung cancer. Steady and merciless. Leo was our only child. He was 39 when he died, fit as a fence post, up before sunrise most mornings, the kind of man who ironed his own shirts and returned shopping carts without thinking about it. The doctors said it was a ruptured aneurysm. Sudden, catastrophic, nothing anyone could have done. Those words had been handed to me in a quiet room with beige walls and a paper cup of water I never touched. I nodded when they said them, because people expect a father to hear the facts. But even then, with grief sitting on my chest like wet sand, something in me had stayed awake. The service was held at a chapel outside Calgary, not far from the river, in one of those modern buildings with broad windows and too much polished stone. It was cold that day, dry cold, the sort that catches in your nose when you breathe in. People came in dark coats and soft voices, and the lobby smelled faintly of coffee, wool, and lilies. Dana stood near the front greeting people. She wore a black dress with long sleeves and small gold earrings Claire would have called tasteful. Her hands moved gently from shoulder to shoulder, accepting sympathy, guiding older relatives toward seats, lowering her eyes at the right moments. If you didn't know her well, you would have thought she was holding herself together with admirable grace. Maybe that was what unsettled me, not that she was calm. Grief can look like many things. I know that. It was the neatness of it. Nothing seemed to catch her off guard. Not the handshakes, not the condolences, not the sight of Leo's photograph beside the guest book. Her face arranged itself before each person reached her, as if she knew exactly which version of sorrow they needed. I watched more than I spoke. That has always been my way. At one point, during the receiving line, a man I didn't recognize came through the side entrance. Mid-30s, expensive coat, posture too easy for a memorial. He didn't sign the book. He didn't speak to anyone else. He went directly to Dana, leaned in, said something brief, and touched her forearm. She looked at him with an expression I could not place at first. Not comfort, not surprise. Recognition, certainly. Familiarity. Something lived in. Then it was gone. She turned and saw me watching. A second later, she was already crossing the floor toward me. "Tom," she said softly, taking both my hands. "You shouldn't be by yourself tonight. Please stay at the house." I had never cared for how quickly she used my first name after marrying Leo. It felt practiced, friendly in a way that asked for more than I wanted to give. "I booked a room," I told her. Her fingers tightened just slightly. "There's no need for that. We're family." The words settled badly. I said I appreciated it. I said I'd think about it. Then I watched her move away again, smooth as ever, toward a cluster of Leo's colleagues from the engineering firm. Leo had built that firm with his friend Marcus Hale. Environmental compliance, land use assessments, field reports for energy and mining projects. Serious work, careful work. He liked the order of it, the measurements, the permits, the maps. When he talked about deadlines, he didn't complain. He just reached for a pen. That was Leo. Quiet, reliable. He made systems for himself and kept them, which is why I could not stop replaying the phone call he had made to me 11 nights before he died. It came just before midnight, and Leo was not a midnight caller. He was usually asleep by 10:30 unless weather or travel had knocked his schedule loose. I remember sitting in my den with a lamp on and an unfinished crossword on my knee when his name lit up my phone. "Dad," he said. His voice was low. "Tired, maybe. Or careful. What's going on?" I asked. There was a pause. Then he said, "I need you to promise me something." I smiled at first. "That depends what it is." "If anything happens to me," he said, "I need you to make sure things are handled properly." I took off my glasses and set them on the side table. "What kind of things?" Another pause. "Just promise me." Most fathers know the sound of their child pretending to stay calm. It does not matter if that child is 6 or 39. The shape of it stays the same. So I stopped trying to lighten the moment. "I promise," I said. "But Leo, what is this about?" "I'll explain when I see you," he said. "I just need you to remember that. He was supposed to come to Nanaimo for Christmas. He never made it." That night after the memorial, alone in my hotel room, I sat beside the window and watched headlights move through the wet streets below. The heating unit hummed under the curtains. Somewhere down the hall, an ice machine emptied with a hard mechanical rattle. I loosened my tie, placed Leo's memorial card on the desk, and stared at his photograph until my eyes lost focus. At 9:14, my phone lit up with a message from an unfamiliar number. "Mr. Mercer, this is Marcus Hale. Leo asked me a year ago to keep a spare key to his workshop. I found something there after the service. It belongs with you. Please don't mention this to Dana." I read it twice. Then I reached for my coat, even though I wasn't going anywhere that night. The room suddenly felt too small. I texted back one line. "Tomorrow morning. Tell me where." Then I set the phone down and listened to the sound of the heater filling the silence. Then I waited. Marcus chose a coffee shop well away from downtown, in a quieter part of the city where nobody was likely to wander in by accident. It was early when I got there. The streets were still damp from overnight snow turning to slush, and the sky had that pale winter light that makes everything look flatter than it is. Inside, the place smelled like espresso and toasted bread. A milk steamer hissed behind the counter. Cups touched saucers. Nobody spoke above a murmur. Marcus was already seated in the back with a laptop bag at his feet and both hands wrapped around a paper cup he clearly wasn't drinking from. He stood when he saw me. His face looked thinner than I remembered. Less sleep, more strain. "Mr. Mercer," he said. I told him to call me Tom. He nodded, but he didn't. We sat down. For a few seconds he just looked at the table, then at the window, then back at me. He was buying himself time. I let him have it. Finally, he reached into his coat pocket and placed a small black USB drive on the table between us. It was ordinary enough. No label, no key ring, just a cheap plastic drive no one would look at twice. "I found it in Leo's workshop," he said, hidden inside a carved-out law manual on the top shelf. He used to keep old binders and code books up there. I looked at the drive, but didn't touch it yet. "When did you find it?" "The afternoon after the service." I went over there because he stopped and rubbed his thumb along the rim of his cup. "I don't know. I think I just needed to be somewhere that still felt like him." That made sense to me. Grief often sends people toward ordinary objects. Tools, mugs, jackets on hooks, things that still hold a person's shape. "He gave you a key?" I asked. Marcus nodded. "About a year ago. Said if I ever needed to use the table saw or drill press, I could. He trusted me." He swallowed once hard. I don't think he trusted many people by the end. He opened the laptop and inserted the drive. The folders appeared in a plain file list. Dates, initials, account exports, photographs, audio clips, scanned PDFs, a spreadsheet titled Simply Timeline. No dramatic names. No attempt to persuade. Just organization. That was Leo. My chest tightened before I opened a single file, because I knew then that whatever this was, he had built it carefully. Marcus clicked the spreadsheet first. Rows of dates filled the screen. Transfers, calls, meetings, license plate notes, pharmacy receipts, insurance policy changes, gaps in travel schedules, references to email chains, and attached images. Each line was brief and factual, the way a good field investigator writes notes for someone else to review later. I felt something cold move through me. He had not been guessing. He had been documenting. Marcus opened a folder of financial records, bank statements from joint accounts, corporate cards, wire confirmations, vendor payments, charitable contributions that did not match any registered organization, reimbursements with no underlying invoices, a steady pattern over 18 months, small amounts at first, then larger, then regular. The money moved through consulting names I didn't recognize, then into an account registered to a man named Evan Cross. Who was that? I asked. Marcus pulled up a photo without answering. It was the man from the memorial. The same coat, the same posture, the same face I had seen across the chapel. Not a stranger after all. Personal trainer, Marcus said quietly. At least that's how Leo first knew him. After that, he let the rest sit where it was. There were more photographs, restaurant patios, parking lots, hotel lobbies, airport pickups. Nothing crude, nothing theatrical, just enough to show a pattern no husband could mistake. Dana and Evan together on days when Leo was out of town. Dana and Evan at places nowhere near home. Dana turning toward him in a way no married woman turns by accident. I looked at each photograph once. Then I looked away. A parent spends years thinking the deepest pain would be losing the child. You do not imagine there are layers beneath that. Things your child carried alone. Things he learned in silence while still calling you on Sundays and asking whether the gutters at your place had been cleaned. Marcus opened a document labeled for Dad. He hesitated before clicking it, as though opening it would make the whole thing less reversible. Then he clicked. The letter was dated 12 days before Leo died. Dad, if you're reading this, it means I either ran out of time or I was right to be careful. I read slowly. Every line felt measured. Not panicked, not emotional, just honest in the way people become when they think clarity may be their last useful act. Leo wrote that he had discovered Dana's affair months earlier. He had hired a private investigator, consulted a lawyer, and begun separating records quietly before filing. He wrote that once Dana seemed to realize he knew, her behavior changed. She started asking about his workouts, his sleep, his supplements, his insurance. She brought up accidental death coverage twice in 1 week. She encouraged him to update policies and review beneficiaries. Then came the line that made me set one hand flat on the table. I changed the beneficiary designation 2 days ago. She does not know. Below that, another. If something happens to me suddenly, especially at home, please don't treat it as simple bad luck. I read the sentence twice more. The coffee shop sounds went dull around me. The cups, the machine, the door opening and closing. It all moved further away. Marcus was staring at his hands. I should have seen it, he said. The last 2 months, he kept making copies of things. He started locking drawers he never used to lock. He asked strange questions about document retention and estate issues, and I thought. He shook his head. I thought it was divorce planning. Ugly, maybe, but survivable. I kept reading. Leo wrote that he had not told me because he was embarrassed, that he thought he could manage it himself, that he was trying to get through the holidays first, that he was sorry. I have read witness statements, accident reports, victim notes, and final messages of all kinds. I spent years teaching younger officers how to separate language from emotion and how to spot what mattered. But when your own son writes, I thought I could handle it myself. There is no professional distance left to take shelter in. I closed the laptop for a moment. Not shut, just lowered enough to breathe. Outside, someone walked past in a red scarf with snow still melting at the curb. Inside, a spoon rang lightly against ceramic. Ordinary things kept happening. That is one of grief's rude habits. The world stays practical while you are trying to survive the hour. When did he send any of this to you? I asked. Marcus shook his head. He didn't. Not directly. I think the drive was for whoever found it first. Maybe for you specifically. Maybe he hoped he'd never need it. He opened the laptop again and moved to an audio folder. There's more. One file was a voice memo recorded inside a vehicle. Leo's voice. Low. Controlled. He was reading plate numbers and timestamps. Another was a brief recording of Dana on a phone call in another room, speaking softly to someone named Evan, telling him, not yet. He's still checking things. Then another. Dana, laughing lightly, saying, once the policy update clears, we'll talk. No shouting, no confession, nothing blunt enough to solve the whole thing on its own, but enough to tighten a pattern. We went through the rest carefully. A private investigator's invoice under another name. A property access log showing Dana entering Leo's workshop on a day she later claimed she had been at a spa. Copies of emails Leo had forwarded to a hidden archive account. Photos of prescription bottles on a bathroom shelf. A screenshot of an online search history involving brain aneurysms, collapse during exercise, and insurance exclusions. That was when I stopped Marcus and asked him to back up. Whose search history? Dana's laptop, he said. Leo copied it after she left the house one morning. I nodded once. Not because I was calm. Because structure matters when the facts begin to move. I asked Marcus to give me a full duplicate of everything and tell me whether anyone else knew. No one, he said. Just me. And now you. Good. He looked at me then, properly, perhaps hearing something in my voice shift. What are you going to do? I looked at the drive on the table. The answer that came first was not emotional. It was procedural. I'm going to verify every category, I said. Financial, digital, physical, medical. Then I'm going to establish timeline, access, motive, and opportunity. After that, I'll decide who gets what. Marcus stared for a second, then gave a small, uneasy nod. He had known I worked investigations. I don't think he had understood until then that grief had not taken that part of me. I asked him one more question. Did Leo ever mention being afraid of anything specific? Marcus exhaled through his nose and thought about it. Only once. About 3 weeks before he died. We were closing up the office late. He said, "If something odd happens to me, don't let people simplify it." I told him he was tired and needed sleep. He stopped there. Then he added, quieter, "I wish I hadn't said that." I took out a notebook from my coat pocket. Paper, not phone. I still trust paper when the stakes are real. At the top of the first page, I wrote 4 lines. Financial movement. Affair confirmation. Insurance changes. Medical concern before death. Then I underlined all 4. Marcus watched me write. "What does that mean?" he asked. "It means this is no longer one problem," I said. "It's a system." We sat in silence after that. Not awkward silence. Working silence. I made him walk me through dates. Who had access to the workshop? When Leo last seemed himself. When Dana began appearing at the office less often. Whether she had any medical training. Whether Leo had changed habits. Whether there had been arguments anyone overheard. Missed meetings, unusual purchases, requests for signatures, gaps in records, damaged devices, erased accounts. Marcus answered what he could. When he didn't know, he said he didn't know. That mattered too. By the time we stood to leave, I had a duplicate drive in my pocket and 6 pages of notes in my hand. The snow had started again outside, fine and dry, barely visible unless it crossed the dark outline of parked cars. Marcus offered to walk me to my rental. At the curb, before we parted, he said, "Tom, do you think she killed him?" I did not answer quickly. Across the street, a delivery truck idled. Somewhere nearby, a gate clanged shut. The cold had a metallic edge to it now. "I think my son believed he was in danger," I said. Marcus waited. "And I think belief like that usually comes from something." I got into the car, locked the doors, and sat without starting the engine. The USB drive felt very small in my coat pocket. I took out my notebook and turned to a fresh page. Then I wrote the first 3 steps. Step 1, secure copies. Step 2, verify cause of death material. Step 3, speak to police without showing everything I know. Then I put the notebook away and looked through the windshield at the falling snow. Then I waited. I did not drive back to the hotel right away. Instead, I pulled into a grocery store parking lot a few blocks away and sat under a light pole with the engine running. Snow tapped softly at the windshield. A cart rolled somewhere across the lot and knocked into a curb. I took the duplicate drive from my pocket, placed it on the passenger seat, and looked at it for a long moment. Grief tells you to move fast. Training tells you not to. I listened to the second voice. The first thing I did was make 2 more copies. One went into a sealed envelope addressed to my lawyer in Victoria with instructions not to open it unless something happened to me. The second I put in the hotel safe. The original stayed on me. I also photographed every page of my notes and uploaded them to a private archive under a name no one in the family would recognize. Only after that did I call the police. Not the general line. Not a friend of a friend. I asked for the major crimes intake desk and requested an appointment with someone senior enough to understand what I was saying without me having to perform it for them. That afternoon I sat across from Detective Miriam Park in a plain interview room at headquarters. She was in her early 50s, quiet in the way competent people often are. No wasted movement. No false sympathy. She let me place the folder on the table and waited until I was ready. I gave her less than half. That was deliberate. I showed her evidence of the affair, evidence of suspicious money movement, Leo's letter, and the note about insurance changes. I told her my son had expressed fear before his death and that I did not consider the circumstances settled. I did not mention every recording. I did not mention the hidden archive. I did not mention the search history yet. When I finished, She folded her hands and looked down at the documents one more time. "Mr. Mercer," she said, "what you've brought suggests fraud, deception, and possibly motive. But motive isn't mechanism. I know. The medical examiner found no obvious trauma. The death was classified as natural. I know that too. She studied me, perhaps noticing I was not there to be soothed. What exactly are you asking for?" "A review," I said, quietly, before anyone tips her off. She glanced again at Leo's letter. "You think his wife killed him?" "I think my son took the trouble to leave a structured record because he believed he was not safe. I think he died 12 days later. And I think people tend to hide inside the word natural when a death happens in a clean house." She let that sit. Then she asked, "What did you do before retirement?" "Investigations." She almost smiled. Not warmth. Recognition. "That explains your folder." I nodded once. Detective Park told me she would request the death file, the original examiner's notes, and any retained samples. She also warned me not to search the house, not to confront Dana, and not to remove property that could later become evidence. I said I understood. That part was true, mostly. When I left the station, I knew two things. First, she had not dismissed me. Second, no one was going to solve this quickly for me. Systems move at their own speed. If I wanted the truth, I would need to keep working parallel to them, carefully and lawfully, without contaminating what might later matter. That evening, I accepted Dana's offer and stayed at the house. The place was in a newer neighborhood outside the city, large enough to look comfortable in photographs and slightly empty in person. Leo had good taste. Clean lines, walnut floors, thoughtful lighting. The kind of home where every object had likely been argued over once and then chosen with care. His boots were still by the back door. That was the first thing I saw when I came in. Mud dried along one sole. Laces loose. Nothing remarkable, unless you knew he would never have left them that way on purpose. Dana met me in the kitchen wearing a cream sweater and soft house shoes, as if this were a difficult but manageable week and she was doing her best to hold a family together. "I'm glad you came," she said. I set my bag down. It seemed simpler. She touched my arm lightly. "You shouldn't be alone right now." The kitchen smelled like lemon cleanser and something roasted. She had cooked, or wanted it to appear that she had. A candle burned near the sink. Music played quietly through ceiling speakers, piano without melody, just enough to smooth the edges of the room. I thanked her and let her show me to the guest room. That was the role now. Tired father. Distracted. Harmless. At dinner, she served chicken, potatoes, and green beans arranged with almost formal care. She poured me wine, though I barely touched it. She spoke about the service, about flowers that had arrived after we left, about how kind everyone had been, about how she still could not believe any of it was real. I watched her hands more than her face. Calm hands. Steady wrists. No missed motion when passing plates. No tremor when she said his name. People grieve differently. I know that. Still, I noticed. Halfway through the meal, she said, "Leo always worried too much. Even with little things. Paperwork. Insurance. Taxes. He liked control." I looked up at her. She took a sip of wine and gave a faint, sad smile, as if sharing a harmless flaw of the man we both loved. The sentence was too convenient. It had not been there by accident. She was placing a frame around him. Anxious. Over-careful. A man who might overinterpret life. I cut another piece of chicken and set down my fork before answering. "He liked order," I said. "That's different." For the first time that evening, her expression shifted half a beat late. Then she smiled again. "Yes, that too." After dinner, she asked whether I needed anything before bed. Tea, towels, extra blankets. I told her I was fine. When the house went quiet, I sat on the guest room bed fully dressed and listened. Heating vents, a dishwasher cycle, footsteps overhead once and twice, a door closing, then silence. At 11:17, I opened my notebook. I wrote down 3 headings. Routine, access, medical. Under routine, I noted what I had already seen. Carefully staged meals, controlled effect, conversational framing, no visible exhaustion. Under access, full household control, unrestricted movement, likely knowledge of schedules, likely knowledge of workout routine. Under medical, no evidence yet, only pre-death concern from Leo's letter and insurance behavior. Then I added another line. Do not move ahead of evidence. That was not for the case. That was for me. The next morning, I rose at 5:10. The house was dark except for the blue light of the microwave clock and a strip of under-cabinet lighting left on in the kitchen. I stood by the sink and looked through the glass doors at the backyard, pale with frost. Leo used to work out at 5:30, Marcus had said. Basement gym before work. Every weekday. I went downstairs. The gym was finished neatly, rubber flooring, free weights, treadmill, rowing machine, bench, towels folded on a shelf. No clutter. No sign of a struggle. No visible damage. The kind of room where a healthy man could die suddenly and leave behind almost nothing that raised its hand. I stood there for several minutes without touching anything. Then I noticed the camera. Not obvious. Small. Mounted high in a corner near a speaker bracket. A home security add-on, maybe. Or a workout camera. Hard to say from the floor. I made no move toward it. Instead, I looked around the rest of the basement and fixed details in memory. Furnace room. Storage closet. Utility sink. Locked cabinet near the stairs. Laundry area. 2 exits. When Dana came downstairs at 6:20 in a robe and socks, she seemed faintly startled to find me there. Couldn't sleep? She asked. Old habit. Early mornings. She hugged her arms lightly against herself and glanced once around the room before looking back at me. I still can't come down here without. She let the sentence trail off and lowered her eyes. I said nothing. That often makes people continue. She did. I found him right there, she said quietly, indicating the mat near the bench. I keep replaying it. If I'd come home sooner. If I'd skipped class. Yoga class, I thought. That was her standing version. Noted. I'm sorry, I said. She nodded, then asked whether I wanted coffee. When she turned away, her shoulders relaxed too quickly for the depth of feeling she had just suggested. It was a small thing, but small things matter when a person is manufacturing the order of a moment. Later that morning, after she left the house saying she had a grief counseling session, I called Marcus from the driveway. Did Leo ever mention cameras in the gym? A pause. Yes. He installed one last spring to check his form on deadlifts. What? Do you know where the footage stored? Local drive in his office, I think. Or cloud backup. I'm not sure. His office. Wiped, according to the file archive. Still worth seeing myself. I went back inside and entered the home office for the first time in daylight. It had been cleaned too carefully. That was my first thought. No paper drift. No charger cable half-tucked behind a desk. No open mail. No scribbled note. Family homes accumulate minor disorder even when people are neat. But this room had the sterile balance of a place that had been reset after attention had already fallen on it. One monitor remained on the desk. No tower. Docking station disconnected. Drawer interiors empty except for pens arranged in a tray. Filing cabinet hanging folders removed. Shred bin empty. I crouched beside the desk and checked dust patterns along the baseboard. There were faint rectangular shadows where something larger had sat recently. External drives, perhaps. Storage boxes. Maybe both. I opened the closet beside the office and found archived tax binders, old field manuals, 2 coats, and a locked document case on the top shelf. I did not open it. Instead, I photographed its position, the make of the lock, and the shelf around it. Step by step. That afternoon Detective Park called. Her tone was still measured, but different now. More focused. There were retained tissue samples, she said. And you were right about one thing. The original toxicology was standard. Nothing expanded. Which means if someone used an uncommon method, no one would have been looking for it. I leaned against the kitchen counter and kept my voice even. Can the samples be tested now? Yes, but I need legal authority and a clean rationale. Your son's letter helps. So do the financial documents. Do it. We're starting the process. Also, do not alert the widow in any way. We're checking insurance changes, beneficiary updates, and pharmacy histories. That was more than I expected on the first call. Understood, I said. Before hanging up, she added, one more thing. The wife's statement said she found him after returning from a 7 a.m. yoga class. I looked out toward the driveway, empty except for Dana's tire marks fading in the frost. Interesting, I said. What? Nothing yet. I just heard her tell the same story in the basement this morning. When the call ended, I went back to my notebook. Under routine, I wrote, story fixed and repeated. Emotion placed where needed. Office sanitized. Possible camera footage missing. Then under medical, I wrote, expanded talks possible. Police moving. And below that, Power shift begins when facts stop being private. That evening, Dana came home carrying takeout containers and speaking softly into her phone before she saw me in the hall. She ended the call too quickly. "Sorry," she said. "My sister." I nodded as though it did not matter. At dinner, she mentioned the estate for the first time. Not directly, carefully. "Eventually, there will be so much paperwork," she said, stirring noodles she barely ate. "Policies, accounts, the house. I can't even think about it." I set my chopsticks down. "No," I said. "Not yet." She looked at me. "Of course not. I just meant eventually. Eventually still requires order." She smiled a little, but there was strain in it now. "Leo always said you liked systems." He was right. The room went quiet after that. Not hostile, just clearer. Outside, snow slid from a branch and thumped softly against the deck rail. Inside, Dana lifted her glass, then put it back down without drinking. For the first time since the funeral, I had the distinct sense that I was no longer only observing her. She had begun observing me back. That night, a little after 11, my phone lit with a message from Detective Park. "We found a pharmacy purchase pattern worth examining. Need to speak tomorrow. Keep doing exactly what you're doing." I read it once and deleted the notification preview from the lock screen. Then I placed the phone face down on the bedside table and listened to the house settle around me. Then I waited. Detective Park asked me to meet her the next morning in the parking lot of a medical building on the edge of the city. It was the kind of place no one remembers afterward. Beige brick, snow piled along the curbs, half the windows dark. I arrived 10 minutes early and stayed in the car with the heater running low. When she parked beside me, she did not get out right away. She called my phone instead. "Passenger side," she said. I moved over and unlocked the door. She got in with a slim folder and a paper cup of coffee that smelled burnt and strong. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Snowmelt tapped under the wheel wells. Somewhere across the lot, a truck backed up with that soft beeping sound commercial lots always seem to have before sunrise. Then she opened the folder. "We found cash purchases from a pharmacy near Red Deer," she said. "Not under Dana's name. No prescription trail, but the dates line up with the period just before your son's death." "What was purchased?" She looked down once more, though she already knew. "High concentration potassium chloride." I said nothing. She let the silence stand. "In a hospital setting, it has legitimate uses," she continued. "Outside that setting, in the wrong hands, it becomes a different kind of item." "I know." She nodded, as if she had expected that answer. "We're also pulling security footage, but the pharmacy's retention is limited. We may get lucky." "May." She closed the folder partway. "Your son's retained tissue samples are being prepared for expanded analysis. We still need the medical science to catch up to the suspicion. Until then, this is still a quiet inquiry." I looked through the windshield at the dirty snowbanks and the half-frozen puddles reflecting a weak gray sky. Then I asked the next practical question. "What do you need from me?" "Nothing reckless," she said. "No searches you can't explain. No accusations. No pressure. If she senses a shift, she'll clean up what remains." I thought of the stripped office, the wiped machine, the polished room with its missing weight. She already has. Then we work with what she missed. That was the right answer. Before she left the car, Detective Park handed me a photocopy of a partial receipt. Date, time, register number, product code, cash transaction, no buyer name, no clean conclusion, but enough to place a hard object on the table. When she was gone, I took out my notebook and wrote 3 steps on a fresh page. Step 1, maintain routine. Step 2, identify what she still believes is safe. Step 3, let process catch up before contact changes. Then I underlined the last line twice. Back at the house, I settled further into the role of a tired father who needed company more than privacy. That was the safest version of myself to present. I made coffee in the mornings and left the mug in the sink. I watched television in the den with the volume low. I took short walks around the block after lunch. I asked Dana whether she wanted groceries. I let her tell me small stories that went nowhere. A casserole from a neighbor, a cousin who might visit next month, a headache she blamed on crying. People reveal things when they think the room belongs to them. On Friday afternoon, she said she was meeting a friend from church. At 1:12, she pulled out of the driveway in the dark blue SUV Leo had bought 2 years earlier. I waited 90 seconds, took my coat, and followed in the rental. Not close. Not enough to trigger the kind of instinct guilty people develop. 2 lights back when traffic allowed it, 3 turns behind when it didn't. She drove south, then west, then into a newer condominium district where buildings were all stone veneer and glass balconies and underground parking ramps. She parked outside visitor stall 6 and entered building C without looking around. I stayed in the car. At 1:27, a man in a charcoal sweater opened the main door from inside and came out to smoke under the awning. Mid-30s, good watch, clean shoes. The same man I had seen at the memorial. He looked up the street once, then back toward the lobby. At 1:31, Dana joined him. She stood close enough that his hand found the middle of her back without hesitation. They were together 6 seconds before he kissed her. No scene, no surprise, no hesitation, just the ordinary ease of a habit. I took 4 photographs through the windshield, wide enough to show the building, tight enough to show faces. One with my dashboard clock visible in the corner of the frame. Then I put the phone down. Evidence first, emotion second, if at all. I did not stay longer. There is a point in surveillance where remaining adds heat and subtracts value. I had what I needed for that day. On the drive back, I thought through the shape of things without letting them run ahead of themselves. Affair established. Financial irregularity documented. Insurance changes noted. Medical concerns supported by suspicious purchases. Now the real work was no longer finding motive. It was proving mechanism, timeline, and access in a way a court could carry. That afternoon, after Dana returned home and resumed her softened widow voice as if she had spent the day lighting candles in sorrow, I began a more disciplined review of the house. Not a search, a review. There is a difference. A search is driven by hunger. A review is governed by limits. I started in the laundry room because people treat utility spaces as invisible. Shelves held detergent, stain remover, light bulbs, extension cords, wrapping paper, batteries, and 3 plastic bins with printed labels. Winter gear, camping, paint. The bins were ordinary. So were the shelves. What interested me was the gap behind the lower cabinet beside the utility sink. It was small, dark, and likely unreachable without kneeling. Exactly the kind of place someone uses for temporary concealment, not permanent storage. I waited until the evening, when Dana was upstairs on a video call with her sister. Then I went down with a flashlight and a wooden ruler from the kitchen drawer. Behind the cabinet, pushed almost to the wall, was a small clear bag. Inside were 2 empty prescription bottles with the labels peeled away. No names, no dosage instructions, no pharmacy stickers, just bottles. I did not touch them with my hands. I photographed them in place, then used a folded dish towel to lift the bag carefully and carry it to the furnace room, where I sealed it inside a clean zip bag from the workshop supply shelf. Not ideal, but contained. Back in the guest room, I wrote the time, location, and handling details on an envelope and placed the bag inside my suitcase. Not to hide it from police, to preserve it until I could transfer it properly. At 9:40, I texted Detective Park one line. Located concealed prescription containers in basement utility area. Untouched except for improvised clean transfer. Need evidence pickup protocol. She replied 7 minutes later. Do not move further items. Keep secure. We'll arrange handoff tomorrow. That was enough. I put the phone face down. Then I waited. The next morning Dana offered me tea before breakfast. Chamomile, she said. You haven't been sleeping. The tea smelled faintly floral, but underneath that was something sharper. Not obvious, just enough to make me hold the mug a little longer before raising it. She stood at the counter watching me. Too still. I smiled faintly, thanked her, and took one small sip against my lips without swallowing. Years earlier, during a poisoning case in Kamloops, an older lab supervisor had told me something I never forgot. When someone cares too much whether you consume something, stop asking what the thing is and start asking why the witness matters. Dana cared whether I drank the tea. That was what mattered first. I carried the mug to the den, set it beside my chair, and waited until she went upstairs to shower. Then I poured the tea slowly into a potted fern near the sliding door. By late afternoon, the outer leaves had begun to curl. That did not prove much on its own. Plants are poor witnesses, but it told me I had made the correct choice. When Detective Park called, I told her about the tea without decoration. She was quiet for a second. Do not consume anything she prepares unless you prepare it with her watching, she said. I had reached that conclusion. We'll document the rest later if needed. Right now the lab work is more important. I asked about the tissue analysis. Still pending, she said. But we got something else. Your son's gym camera was linked to a local storage unit that's now missing. However, there was a cloud sync account. Partial footage survived. I sat up straighter in the chair. How partial? Enough to be interesting. She would not tell me more on the phone. I respected that. Later that evening, Dana raised the estate again, this time more directly. She brought a folder to the table after dinner and laid it beside my plate with what she must have thought was careful reluctance. I know this is awful timing, she said, but some forms are time-sensitive. I wiped my mouth with a napkin and looked at the folder without opening it. What forms? Just administrative things. Insurance notifications. Some account transitions. It's all routine. Routine. A useful word when a person wants signatures to seem harmless. I opened the folder. Beneficiary confirmation forms. Temporary account access requests. Property management authorization. A draft letter regarding sale valuation. Too much, too soon. Several pages had tabs already placed where a signature would go. She had prepared this. Not in grief. In expectation. I closed the folder and slid it back toward her. Not tonight. Her mouth tightened. Barely. Tom, I'm only trying to keep things from becoming a mess. Then let them stay still for a week. She folded her hands together, then apart again. There are legal time frames. I'm aware. She looked at me carefully then. Not at my face. At my posture. My tone. Measuring. For the first time, I let her see a little steel. Not enough to alarm. Just enough to establish that the room no longer belonged entirely to her. We'll do this in order, I said. Nothing gets signed without review. Nothing gets moved because it feels urgent. And nothing involving Leo's name leaves this house through haste. She leaned back slowly. I didn't realize you thought I was being hasty. I think you're being early. That landed. The silence after it was useful. No argument. No raised voice. Just a boundary placed on the table like a document. She gathered the folder, stacked the pages square, and said she understood. But her hands were not quite as steady as they had been on the first night. At 10:18, after she went upstairs, Marcus called. He spoke softly, as if he were in a hallway. I found something in old project archives, he said. Leo had scanned a notebook page and saved it to the office server months ago. I never noticed the label because it was buried in field files. What is it? A handwritten list. Times. Dosages maybe. And one line that says, if routine changes, wait until after Thursday. I looked toward the dark staircase. Send me an image only, I said. Not the original file. He understood why. A minute later it came through. The handwriting was not Leo's. At the bottom corner, partly cut off by the scan, was a note in Leo's hand, found in kitchen recycling. Keep. I stared at the image for a long time. Then I saved it to the encrypted archive and wrote one more line in my notebook. She makes plans on paper when she thinks paper disappears. The house had gone quiet by then. Heating vents. Distant plumbing. A floorboard settling overhead. I closed the notebook, turned off the bedside lamp, and lay back without sleeping. Somewhere between grief and evidence, a different kind of calm had begun to take shape. Not peace. Order. And order, once it arrives, tends to keep moving. Then I waited. By the start of the second week, the house felt different. Not louder. Not openly tense. Just narrower. Dana had become more careful with her words, and I had become more precise with mine. We moved around each other politely, the way people do in waiting rooms and court hallways. Every exchange sounded normal if you only heard the words. The truth was in the timing. The pauses. The things neither of us said. Detective Park called me just after noon on Tuesday. I was in the garage, standing beside Leo's workbench with a tape measure in one hand, pretending to sort extension cords. The air in there held the dry smell of sawdust and cold metal. A small radio sat unplugged on the shelf. His drill bits were still lined up by size in a drawer organizer he had labeled in block letters. Her voice was low and direct. The lab confirmed elevated potassium levels in retained tissue inconsistent with normal post-mortem findings, she said. There is also microscopic evidence consistent with an injection site near the upper left arm. I closed my eyes once. Not from surprise. From the weight of hearing it said plainly. So that's it, I said. That's enough for homicide, she replied. We're moving. I set the tape measure down on the bench. Outside, a dog barked somewhere across the street. A car door shut. Ordinary sounds. It was strange how steady the world remained while a father learned, with scientific certainty, that his son had been murdered in his own home. We also recovered partial camera footage from the cloud sync, she continued. Not complete, but enough to establish that your son began a workout normally that morning. The camera cuts before collapse. More importantly, it shows your daughter-in-law entering the basement much earlier than she claimed. I said nothing. There are warrants in progress, she said. Searches first. Arrest after evidence is secured. I need you to keep her in place tomorrow evening for about 90 minutes. Here. Yes. Somewhere respectable. Controlled. Nothing that feels unusual. A conversation about the estate would make sense. I looked around the garage. Leo's gloves on the pegboard. The oil stain near the bin where he used to set down the mower. A ruler with his initials on the back from when he was maybe 14. Understood, I said. One more thing, Detective Park added. Do not confront her with the cause of death. Do not accuse. Do not try to get a confession. We're beyond fishing now. We need containment. I understand the difference. I thought you might. When the call ended, I stayed where I was for a while. I put one hand flat on the workbench and let the grain of the wood sit under my palm. Leo had built that bench himself the summer after he bought the house. He sent me pictures while he was working on it. Measured twice, cut once, then sent a final photo with one line beneath it, still level. You raised me right. I looked at the pegboard until the blur in my eyes settled. Then I took out my notebook. On a fresh page, I wrote, Step 1. Keep schedule unchanged. Step 2. Invite discussion she already wants. Step 3. Let her talk into structure. Step 4. No accusation. No drift. No anger. Then I put the notebook away and went back inside. That evening, over a dinner neither of us really tasted, I told Dana I thought we should finally review the estate paperwork the next night in the sitting room. She looked up too quickly. Tomorrow. Yes. She studied my face, searching for something. Are you sure you're ready? No, I said. But readiness is usually overrated. That seemed to relax her. Of course, she said. I can organize everything. I'm sure you can. She gave a small smile and asked whether 7 o'clock worked. I said it did. The following day moved with the clean, false calm that often comes before a warrant. Dana left the house around 11 and returned with 2 shopping bags and a bottle of wine she set on the counter as if planning a difficult but civilized family meeting. She wore a soft gray blouse that evening, simple makeup, hair pinned back. Not mourning exactly. More like someone preparing to be seen as reasonable. I wore a navy sweater and the same watch I had worn for years on interviews, hearings, and trial testimony. I do not believe in lucky objects, but I do believe in familiar weight. At 6:55, she carried 2 folders into the sitting room and placed them on the coffee table beside coasters and untouched glasses. The room was warm. Lamps on, curtains drawn, a fire moving quietly behind glass. Leo had chosen that room carefully. Bookshelves, deep chairs, clean lines, meant for conversation, not performance. That suited me. Dana sat first and opened the top folder. I tried to simplify everything, she said. There are still some insurance issues, but most of the banking side should be straightforward once authority is confirmed. I took my seat across from her, not beside her. Good, I said. She began with the house. Sale options. Timing. Market conditions. Repair estimates. Then she moved to accounts, speaking in that calm, administrative voice people use when they want paperwork to outrun scrutiny. I let her go on for several minutes. Then I asked my first question. When did you first become aware Leo had changed his beneficiary forms? She blinked once. I'm sorry, the insurance. I wasn't aware he had changed anything. I nodded as if simply placing a note in my mind. And the trainer? A beat passed. I don't know what you mean. The man from the memorial. The one who touched your arm like he belonged there. Her face changed very slightly. Not collapse. Not panic. Just the brief flattening that comes when a prepared script has to reach for a page that is not there. He's a friend, she said. From the gym. I see. The room stayed quiet except for the low sound of the fire unit. Dana set one hand on the folder to steady it. Tom, I know this is a hard time. People may have looked odd to each other at the service. I don't think. I raised a hand once gently. Not to scold. To stop the drift. I'm not asking for impressions, I said. I'm asking for facts. That changed the air. She sat back. I continued in the same tone. Here's what I know. You were involved with another man during your marriage to my son. Money moved out of shared accounts over an extended period. Insurance discussions took place shortly before Leo died. His office was clean beyond what grief requires. And you have been trying to move paperwork faster than the circumstances justify. Her face had gone pale now, but her voice came out controlled. If you're accusing me of an affair that is private and completely separate from Leo's death. Private is not the same as separate. She stared at me. Then she tried a different track. Leo was under enormous pressure. He wasn't sleeping. He had become suspicious about everything. He checked up on me. He read into things. I didn't want to say that after he died because it felt cruel, but since you're forcing this, I'm not forcing anything, I said. I'm defining the room. That stopped her again. No raised voice. No lecture. Just the line placed where it belonged. For a few seconds, she looked at me with something close to irritation, as though I had failed to stay inside the role she had assigned me. Then she leaned forward and lowered her voice. What exactly do you want from me? A timeline, I said. In your own words. Of what? The morning Leo died. Her fingers tightened on the paper edge. I already gave my statement. I'm aware. Give it again. She hesitated, then began. Yoga class. Home shortly after 7. Basement. Found him on the mat. Called emergency services. Tried to wake him. Panic. Shock. Everything she had already said, laid out in the correct order, smooth from repetition. I let her finish. Then I asked, and before yoga? What? Before you left the house. I was asleep. For the full night? Yes. No wake up. No tea. No conversation. No basement. Her eyes hardened then. No, I nodded once. The knock at the front door came right on time. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just firm. Dana turned toward the sound, annoyed more than alarmed. Were you expecting someone? Yes, I said. She looked back at me. For what? I rose from the chair slowly. So the next part can happen in the correct order. She stood to now, but not fully. Half risen. Uncertain. What does that mean? I walked to the hall and opened the front door. Detective Park stood there with 2 uniformed officers and another plainclothes investigator behind her. No lights. No sirens. No theater. Just winter air coming in around polished shoes and dark coats. Dana had come into the hall by then. She saw the badges first, then the folder in Detective Park's hand. Her voice changed at once. What is this? Detective Park stepped inside, calm and formal. Dana Mercer, we have judicial authorization to search this property in relation to the death of Leo Mercer. You are also being detained pending further investigation. Dana turned to me so quickly I heard the heel of her shoe catch on the floor. You called them? I closed the door behind the officers and looked at her directly for the first time all week without pretending not to know. I gave the truth somewhere to stand, I said. She stared at me, breathing fast now. This is insane. No, I said. It's structured. The officers began moving through the house with quiet efficiency. One toward the office, one toward the basement. Detective Park remained in the hall, reading formal language from the warrant, while Dana's face seemed to lose one expression after another. Grief first, confusion second, then anger. Not loud anger. Not yet. Just the bare, cold shape of a person realizing the room has been taken away from her. She looked at me as if she wanted a crack in my posture, some appeal, some softness she could still work with. I gave her none. You had no right, she said. I had every right. Her mouth trembled then, though not from sorrow. You don't know what Leo was like at the end. No, I said. I know exactly what he recorded. That landed harder than anything else had. For the first time, real alarm moved through her. Not because of my tone, because of the word recorded. She understood then that this was no longer about suspicion or family pressure or a widower's instinct. It had crossed into documents, files, timelines, systems she could not charm. Detective Park finished reading and asked for Dana's phone. Dana did not hand it over immediately. An officer stepped forward. Then she gave it up. The rest happened quietly. A seated wait at the dining table while the search team worked. A request for her keys. A brief, clipped question about medications in the home. Another officer carrying evidence bags through the hallway. No one rushed. No one shouted. That was important. Reality is often clearest when nobody raises their voice. At 8:14, Detective Park received a call and stepped aside to answer it. When she returned, she spoke only to me. Search team at the condominium recovered additional materials, she said. Emails, cash receipts, remaining chemical product. I held her gaze. And him. In custody. That was enough. Dana was watching us from the table. She could not hear the words, but she heard the shape of finality in them. Tom, she said then, and her voice was softer than I had heard it in days. Please, whatever you think. I turned to face her. This stopped being about what I think, I said. A while ago. No anger. No speech. Just a fact. She looked down after that. At 8:26, Detective Park informed her she was under arrest on suspicion related to Leo's homicide, pending formal charges. One officer moved to each side of her. She stood slowly, almost carefully, as if dignity might still be salvageable if she moved with enough control. When they placed the cuffs on her, she looked at me one last time. Not pleading, not grieving, trying to understand how she had misread me so completely. Maybe she had looked at my age, my silence, my grief, and mistaken all three for weakness. A lot of people make that error. The front door opened. Cold air came in again. Shoes crossed the threshold. The porch light caught the fine snow still falling across the driveway. Then she was gone. I stayed in the hall after the vehicles left. The house was no longer quiet in the same way. Search officers were still moving room to room, speaking low, labeling, photographing, documenting. But underneath that was another kind of silence. The useful kind. The kind that comes after denial has lost the room. Detective Park stepped beside me and handed me a business card with a direct number written on the back. We'll be in touch tonight once digital triage is done, she said. I nodded. Then I looked toward the sitting room, where the estate folder still sat open on the table exactly where Dana had left it, tabs neatly arranged, signature lines waiting for a future that had just ended. And for the first time since Leo's funeral, I felt something inside me become very still. Then I waited. I did not sleep that night. After the police left, I made a pot of coffee in Leo's kitchen because there was something steadying about following ordinary steps. Water, filter, grounds, switch. The machine clicked and breathed steam into the quiet. I stood at the counter and watched the dark stream fill the glass pot while evidence technicians moved through the last rooms of the house. At 11:40, Detective Park called. Her voice was composed, but there was more movement behind it now. Doors, footsteps, someone speaking softly in the background. We've completed the first digital review, she said. There's enough for charges. I leaned one hand against the counter. Tell me. Emails between Dana and the other man. Financial transfers linked to the false vendors. Messages discussing timing. Search records on substances and collapse during exercise. There are also notes about insurance payouts and beneficiary concerns. I closed my eyes for a moment. And the cause. The lab confirmation is already in. Elevated potassium chloride levels inconsistent with natural death, plus the injection site evidence. With the video placing her downstairs earlier than reported, we have mechanism, opportunity, and deception. The coffee machine gave its small finishing click. Was she alone? I asked. No. The other subject appears to have helped with planning, account movement, and procurement. We recovered product stock and transaction records from his condominium. He was taken in tonight while trying to delete files. I pictured the man from the memorial, the easy posture, the hand at the middle of Dana's back. All that quiet familiarity built on theft and calculation. What happens now? I asked. Formal charging package goes to Crown first thing in the morning. Fraud charges will be added to the homicide file. Insurance fraud, theft from joint accounts, conspiracy. There's a lot. I looked around the kitchen. Leo's mug still in the drying rack. A dish towel folded over the oven handle. The shopping list magnet on the fridge with his handwriting under Dana's. Milk, olive oil, trash bags called Dad. That last one sat there like a hand against the ribs. Mr. Mercer? I realized Detective Park had said my name twice. I'm here. You did good work, she said. Careful work. I appreciated that she said it that way. Not brave, not extraordinary, just careful. That was closer to the truth. After the call, I poured coffee into a plain white mug and carried it into the sitting room. The estate folder still lay open on the table, but now an evidence marker sat beside it. One of the tabs had been lifted for fingerprint work. The fire had long since gone out behind the glass. I sat down in Leo's chair and looked at the room in its ordinary light. The truth had not appeared through a dramatic confession or one perfect clue. It had come together the way most real things do. A transfer here, a date there, a repeated sentence, a missing device, a receipt, a lab report, a lie told too smoothly, then a second lie to support it, then a trail that could carry its own weight. That mattered to me, because it meant Leo had not vanished into rumor or instinct or a father's refusal to accept loss. He had left facts, and facts, handled properly, had done what they were supposed to do. The next morning, I met with Detective Park and one of the Crown attorneys in a conference room at headquarters. The room was plain, dry air, fluorescent light, a stack of bankers' boxes along one wall. Someone had brought in stale muffins nobody touched. They walked me through the charging outline. First-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud over the statutory threshold, theft, insurance-related offenses still under review depending on how far the payout process had gone before arrest. None of it sounded dramatic when read aloud, just numbered counts on typed pages. But that calm administrative language carries its own weight. It means the system has stopped merely listening and begun acting. They showed me selected exhibits, enough to explain the path. Banking records showing more than $700,000 redirected over time through fabricated business channels. Insurance correspondence showing repeated efforts to expand and confirm accidental death coverage. Partial cloud video placing Dana in the basement before the emergency call timeline she had given. Messages with the other man discussing, waiting until routine settles, and keeping mornings normal. Search history related to substances that could mimic sudden medical collapse. The pharmacy purchase trail, the recovered containers, the toxicology findings from retained tissue, and Leo's letter. Still, in the middle of all of it, the most difficult thing to look at was not the forensic report or the financial chart. It was the single page he had written to me in his measured handwriting, asking me not to accept his death at face value if something happened suddenly. He had known enough to be afraid, and calm enough to leave a map. By late afternoon, the charges were public. The story moved quickly after that, though not quickly in the way television teaches people to expect. There were no microphones in driveways when I left the station. No crowd. No shouted questions. Just calls and statements. Then a slow spread through professional circles, neighbors, and local news. Marcus came by the house that evening with clean clothes for me and a paper bag of sandwiches neither of us really wanted. He stood in the kitchen, looked around once, and asked, "Is it all real now?" "Yes," I said. He nodded and set the bag down. Then, after a moment, he said, "I kept thinking maybe I was overreacting when I found the drive. Maybe grief was making everything look darker." "It wasn't grief," I told him. "It was pattern recognition." He looked at me, and I could see that the sentence steadied him. We spent the next 2 hours going through practical matters. The business, locks, account notifications, staff communication, temporary authority, which calls had to happen immediately and which could wait until morning. I wrote a list on a legal pad because lists give people something to hold when the shape of life changes too fast. Notify firm counsel. Freeze non-essential account movement. Secure Leo's workshop. Collect personal items after release by police. Coordinate with a state attorney. Preserve all digital backups. Marcus took the page when we were done and folded it into his coat pocket like something valuable. That week became a chain of rooms. Conference room, lawyer's office, estate office, police station, bank manager's office. Back again. Everywhere we went, the same thing happened in different language. Someone opened a file. Someone confirmed a number. Someone checked a date. Someone printed an authorization page. Someone said there would be a process. And because there was a process, Dana and the man she planned with did not get what they had built toward. The insurance claim was frozen the moment the homicide file turned active. The fraudulent transfers were traced. The remaining liquid assets were restricted by court order. The house could not be sold. The false vendors were linked back to accounts under their control. By the time formal asset review was complete, the structure they had counted on had collapsed into documentation. That, more than anything, felt right. They had trusted paperwork when it served them. In the end, paperwork closed around them instead. Months later, when the case reached court, I attended every day. The courtroom was cooler than I expected. Most of them are. Too much air conditioning, too much polished wood, too much waiting. Dana sat at the defense table in neutral clothing, hair cut shorter now, face clearer without the social version of herself arranged on top of it. She did not look at me often. The other man did. He had agreed to cooperate after the digital evidence and purchase trail left him very little room. Not a noble choice, just arithmetic. His testimony was careful, self-protective, and damaging all at once. He admitted to the affair, the financial siphoning, the plan to remove Leo from the picture once Dana believed the insurance and account paths were ready. He described pharmacy runs made outside the city, the discussions about what would look sudden, and Dana's insistence that morning's in.